And let's arrive fully to our practice. I don't have my chime handy, so I'm just going to pretend a little invitation chime. Alrighty. Arrive, friends. I'm going to close my eyes for just a minute and settle in. And I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to Recovery Dharma, a Buddhist-inspired approach to recovery. And it is a mindful, what we do in the Spokane Sangha is we extend this and we refer to it as a mindful way of understanding our relationship to habit energy. And the reason why we broaden that scope a little bit is because most of us recognize that when we reduce or eliminate probably the most destructive habit energy, maybe that's related to drugs and alcohol for you, there's still a whole lot of mind, body, spirit, habit energy to contend with. So while we may stop drinking, there's still within us this habituated experience of grasping, clinging, distracting, reaching. And these mindfulness approaches really help us address that, because when we can alleviate one habit, we alleviate most habits. And so that's what we look at. And we use these Buddhist approaches, these Buddhist-inspired practices to really mature the way we respond to triggers and activations. And this is a way of cultivating healthy, adaptive coping. Because living as a human being is really, really challenging at the best of times. And then when we have stressors, it makes things even more difficult. Pardon me while I scooch to the edge of my chair. So I'd like to invite us to settle into the body. So let's land there. And just take a quick peek through the body. Scan the body head to toe, in and out. See how you're feeling. Allow your practice to be an invitation to rest, if that is what the body needs today. If today you're feeling a little bit more energetic and you'd like a little movement in your body, the only thing I'd ask is that you turn your camera off so that the movement that you have going on doesn't create sort of a disequilibrium for those of us who are watching the screens. And I'd also like to suggest today that if you are preparing a meal or eating your lunch or snacking, that you come into a little bit of awareness and mindfulness, and maybe again turn your camera off, considering that there are people in the community who are trying to understand their relationship to food. And watching people eat can stir up unpleasant feelings. This is also true for any of you out there who are using devices, vaping, that kind of thing. I'm sorry, I don't actually know the words for those devices. I don't smoke, so you get the idea. We're just trying to create a considerate environment to really create the conditions for everyone to have a peaceful experience. And in that way, as we settle in, we can really feel like we can turn away from the external stimuli so that we can go inward and really explore the practice that is happening in the month of March for the Spokane Sangha, and that is exploring the 8 worldly winds. And I would like to repeat what those are. They are categorized, they're sort of configured in 4 pairs of opposites. And these are designed as broad concepts to stimulate your mind to see how your lived experience fits in these 4 categories. And you may find that in your life experience, they don't fit, and you make up your own pair of opposites, and I would encourage you to do that. You're familiar with the first pairs of opposites, and that is pleasure and pain. What might be less familiar to you are gain and loss, fame and disgrace. And the one I'd like to focus on today is praise and blame. And the reason why I'd like to bring praise and blame forward is due to a share that many of us heard yesterday that I found deeply inspiring. And it had to do with this individual's lived experience of grieving their substance of choice. And that was surprising. And I so appreciated the vulnerability and the honesty of revealing that, because it is such a true aspect to habit energy that doesn't get a lot of attention. We grieve the familiarity, the habit, because at one time or another it served a positive purpose. Some of that positive purpose was simply its familiarity and its comfort. We all do a lot of different things that aren't necessarily good for us, but they bring us comfort. They bring ease to a stressful situation. A perfect example of this is any kind of comfort food. It may not be good for us, but maybe it's convenient. Maybe it hits a flavor center in the mind that brings a familiarity, a nostalgia, a sense of soothing. We all do it. It's a very, very normal, somewhat adaptive thing to do. And we grieve it when it's gone. And I would like to bring forward grief in the pair of opposite blame, praise and blame. And I'd like to bring under the umbrella of grief something that's very familiar in the realm of recovery, and that is denial. Denial is one of the first stages of grief. You might be familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief, and this is reflective of grief when we think of the loss of a person or a beloved. And one of the first things that happens, a reaction in the mind and body, is to deny the reality. Can't believe it happened. And that particular stage of grief, denial, it may be the first thing that appears, but it happens throughout the grief process. It arises repeatedly. So The stages of grief are non-linear. When I think about that and put it in the context of recovery, what comes alive for me is the situation that many of us have experienced where we've been confronted by the concern of someone else who is trying to illuminate awareness of a problem, a habit energy going awry. And so the pairing, rather than praise and blame, the pairing in that instance is concern and denial. Somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'm worried about you. And what's the first thing we do? Why? I'm fine. I don't have a problem. I'm good. And what happens underneath that, when we are really engaged with negative habit energy, is in that process of denial, in that process of self-protection, we know on maybe even a subconscious level that things aren't going well. We are doing things that compromise our integrity. We are acting out in ways that are shocking and surprising even to ourselves, and we can't seem to do anything different. And so what begins to happen internally with that denial is self-loathing and self-blame. And so what happens in that state is anytime somebody comes toward us with a little bit of encouragement, it's met with self-loathing and rejection. And we even do that in recovery. People tell us how good we're doing, and it's hard to receive that praise. I beg your pardon. It's hard to receive that praise. Because something inside is saying, yeah, I don't really deserve that. I'm a terrible person. I'm a piece of shit. If they really knew me, they wouldn't be saying those things. And this feeds another aspect, another pairing that we see a lot in recovery and even in active habit energy. And that is the way we isolate. We deny a sense of connection and belonging. So let's loop this back to the 8 worldly winds and this particular pairing of praise and blame. And I invite you to think about this now in different ways, different manifestations. Praise can come to us in the form of concern, encouragement, inclusivity, and belonging. And depending upon where we are in the journey, we can interpret that as denial, self-loathing, rejection, and isolation. I bring this forward to you because I don't want your minds to be fixed on just those 2 words. Praise, good job. That was wonderful. All the accolades, the cheerleading that you think of, because there are so many ways that praise can appear in our lives that we will reject. Again, praise in the form of concern, praise in the form of encouragement, praise in the reminder that you belong and we want to include you. And blame shows up in we think about blame as something that we're externalizing. We're blaming the situation, we're blaming the other person. But blame can also be weaponized inward. The way we blame ourselves. It just shows up in denial, regret, a lack of acceptance, loathing, and then the stories we concoct that keep us very isolated and small. So I'd like to take just a few minutes and allow this to settle into your own experience, your own life, and see what resonates with you. See how denial has manifested in your life as a form of blame. Or see how praise has manifested as a form of concern that you weren't quite ready to accept. We look at these pairs of opposites, endeavoring to understand the conditions surrounding them, not to cling tighter to them, but to actually create more space. Let these concepts open up so that we become more neutral when they arise in our very human experiences. So take this in, friends. See what your life is trying to show you, and enjoy your reflection. Friends, it is said that the Buddha the one who awakened, and all Buddhas were able to awaken to all the conditions and causes of suffering, discomfort, maladaption, and so on. And I love the idea that we can take a single pair of opposite, praise and blame, and we can now deconstruct it and add some nuance and texture to it. I brought forward 3 more pairs of opposites that are alive in my life. And you're invited to do the same. How does praise and blame appear in your specific experience, your karmic unfolding? That is what you are here to identify and learn from. It is your cause and condition for your life. And it's extraordinary to think of how much I just shared with you today, and to consider that a Buddha is able to awaken to that and so much more. The dedication to this is motivated by reducing suffering in the world. And so we're invited to take that on and to take that in. And we'll end our time, our meditation time together with a simple chant to Shakyamuni Buddha, just to pay honor to this individual, to this human mind that was able to see and understand so much. And the legacy of that wisdom lives and breathes in each of us. So I'll chant this 3 times. If you know this particular chant, you can chant with me. Otherwise, you can just sit back and enjoy. It goes like this. Taya tao muni muni maha muni soha. Taya tao muni muni maha muni soha. Taya tao muni muni maha muni soha. Thank you, friends. Let's go ahead and end our practice today with a dedication of merit. The 8 worldly winds. This is a practice of cultivating a deep, deep rooting anchor so that when the winds come, we can be blown around without being uprooted. This is one of those humbling and humiliating practices because we have to be willing to accept that when we experience suspicion over someone's concern, we are probably experiencing some karma ripening for when we have expressed unskillful concern. When we experience somebody else's lack of acceptance, it could be karma ripening for our own inability to accept. These are just wonderful mirrors to start keeping cleaner so that we can become more honest, less transactional, and truly more loving compassionate beings. Every single person here is capable of this. It is simply a matter of practice. Thank you so much for bringing your practice here today. It inspires me so, so deeply. Have a great weekend, friends. We'll see you next time. Namaste.